I like this idea that we can be neurotic and still elegant, still
Yeah.
poised in our approach with how we manage our feelings, even when they are so huge, we feel like we're going to get swallowed whole. This is Interfering Neurotic with me, Dr. Ash King, and mindfulness coach Darren Larson, where we navigate a life lived with the curses and blessings of big feelings. Coming up, we dive into Ash's mindfulness spa experiment and how marathon training is like a meditation retreat. People's discomfort with your discomfort, and the agony of being reminded, you got this. Becoming emotionally bilingual with a partner whose love language involves spreadsheets, and taking responsibility for our big feelings and exploring the quest to become more emotionally elegant. Welcome to Interfering Neurotic. You're with Ash King and Darren Larson. Hey Darren, how you going today?
Hey, hey Ash, how's it going? I'm looking forward to catching up with you. Been thinking about you a lot last couple weeks.
Yeah, no, I've been thinking about you because you've been in my mind and I've been doing the challenge that you posed, the little mini challenge at the end of the last episode. The task to kind of see and experience and observe little moments of emotion, or like when you notice that something is showing up, or the feelings or sensations, I should say, that are coming up in my body. So yeah, there's been a few incidences where I've kind of almost taken like a little magnifying glass and gone, that's fascinating.
Oh yeah, exactly. Should we just dive in? What's something you noticed? I'm
Yeah.
so curious.
Okay, so I messaged you about this because I was so excited when it happened as well, because it was literally right after we recorded the episode, and I went to a communal spa in Sydney. It's like a new one. It's so beautiful. They've thought out everything, the beautiful gold fixtures, all of the wood, the sound in the space. And so obviously in the spa, there's a few different types of experiences you can have. You can go into the steam room, you can go into the sauna, and they also have an ice bath. So I felt like it was almost like a little contained experiment for sitting with uncomfortable sensations, because I'm not one of those people who like loves being hot or like loves being cold. Like I just love being comfortable. And
Okay, yeah,
I tend to
relatable.
notice,
Yeah.
yeah, I tend to notice pretty quick, especially if I get too hot. I get quite horrible to be around. But I figured, look, I'm here. I'm going to take this opportunity to really be present in this very hot sauna, sitting there and recognizing the feelings that were coming up in my body as my body temperature sort of increased and increased and increased. And I did the same thing in the ice bath. And I'm like one of those real wusses in the ocean, in a cold pool. Honestly, you have not heard a human being whinge as much as I whinge whilst getting into a pool. I feel like I've lost many friends that way. But when I did the ice bath, I went and sat in there. I did like a 3 minute sit, like kind of fully submerged, up to my chin or whatever it was. And one thing that I found really fascinating was the pain. So in my extremities, in my hands and my feet, I started to notice that they were becoming painful. Now, I know from my study in psychology that this type of pain is not, unless you're in there for like hours and hours, not going to have any long-term repercussions. It's
Mm,
often the thing that they do to test pain responses or pain endurance in psychological tests. So I
yeah.
was like, I know this is not going to hurt me. And so I tried to do what you tasked in the end of the episode and go, okay, well, how do I know that this is pain and not just merely discomfort? Because I felt uncomfortable. I'm sitting in this bloody freezing bath. It wasn't that nice. But I noticed that pain was something else and was existing somewhere else in my body, and was trying to tease apart my understanding and definition of that.
Okay. Would you say that? So I'm really curious about your language. And one of the things about what we're talking about that makes it so slippery and hard to talk about is language. And we have conventional language talking about our feelings. And as we talked about last week, we're trying to make this distinction between these sensations in the body that how I approach it obviously convey some kind of emotion or affect. So when you say discomfort and pain, which part of that are you putting in the emotion family, or is that part of what you were doing or not?
Yeah, so I suppose that I noticed that there was not really any emotional sort of
Okay.
texture to it, which made me have a different type of an experience. It did feel quite physical because I knew that I was in a freezing cold bath, and it didn't. I mean, maybe if there was layers of emotion, it would have been in my evaluation of my ability to do that ice bath,
Yeah.
challenge.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing for me is I feel like we live at a time where everybody is looking for some magical ingredient, like ice baths, right? Oh, somebody discovers that they do an ice bath, they find it challenging, and then they get this reward afterwards. Maybe they feel focused or relaxed or alert, and then they say, "Oh, ice baths are this magical way to be healthy." I personally, when I hear these stories, I what I hear from a mindfulness perspective is developing a skill of kind of, we could call it composure with discomfort, is what I think is the magical. It's not really magical, it's very natural, but the brain knows how to calibrate itself to the discomfort and not escalate. So what I hear in your report is sort of this curiosity, acknowledging the context, acknowledging you're not in any kind of real danger. So there's an intellectual awareness of I'm sort of willingly allowing myself to be a lab rat and the researcher at once. I'm using my own perceptions as the thing I'm investigating. But it doesn't sound like that had a hugely emotional aspect to it. So it was more like you were tuning into pure physical discomfort and even intense discomfort without necessarily that turning into what we would call an emotional story. That's what I'm
Mm.
hearing. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I've got other like examples of that. I remember when I went to the gym for the first time and first started weight training, or maybe in my yoga classes where I'm challenged to do quite a difficult posture, and recognizing that the body does have quite an expanded capacity to endure things that are very
Uh-huh.
uncomfortable, and using that as something in the back of your mind that you can
Uh-huh.
pull or draw on when you're like, oh, I'm feeling an emotion. I do feel like when it's an emotional discomfort, it does feel like a different genre of experience.
Yeah, totally. Right. Well, yeah, and you're reminding me of when I trained for a marathon before I went to my first silent meditation retreat. And what I noticed was how similar those two things were. When I was on the meditation retreat, I like, oh, I know what this is. When I trained for a marathon, I started out, there's no way I could have run 26 miles at the beginning. And then every week, I just yielded to this training program. And every week, I was uncomfortable for some portion of it. And it's just like this moving target. And when I would train, I would reach a mileage where everything in my mind was, okay, this is good. Other people are still in bed. You've done a good job. Stop. Why keep running? You've come this far. Let's celebrate. Let's stop. But I had to keep going because the little program said 2 more miles, whatever, right? So my body would kind of start to give up, and then my mind would say, let's stop. And I would have to negotiate this precarious place where I'm going to keep going even though I'm uncomfortable. Meditation retreat was so similar, only I'm not running, I'm sitting. We're sitting. How long we have to sit here? When are they going to ring the damn bell and release me from this prison of whatever's going on inside me mentally and emotionally and physically, let's be honest. But it was such an interesting thing that I could draw from what I knew about the marathon training in the meditation. And you're right, we do know that it's not like our athletes are superhuman. They've just developed skills around interpreting discomfort. It sounds like I'm endorsing being uncomfortable at any cost, and it's certainly not what I'm trying to do. But I'm trying to say that I think we can be surprised the capacity we have for feeling uncomfortable and not making it into misery. Question I have for you, though, about the specifics while we're still talking about it. At some point, you were done in the cold water, right? Would you
Mhm.
say you were aware then that did what got you out of the cold water? Did that feel like a move into into comfort away from the cold, or was there an emotional like get me out of here kind of vibe to it?
They
Do you
have a
remember?
timer on next to the bath, and so it was more like an achievement based, like similar to what you said about
Yeah.
your running. It was like if I
Yeah.
can make it to that time.
Perfect.
But
Yep.
what I actually really loved, which hopefully doesn't make me sound like too much of a creep, but like was watching other people's experiences in there because there was
Uh-huh.
obviously people who had done this before. So they got in, they had quite this like equanimous look on their face as they sat there and they were breathing. There's other people who like you saw their face, they were getting in and they were in there for about 30 seconds and then out they came. So everyone's having this real different experience and it was really amusing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you're reminding me of one time I was in Las Vegas, kind of not really something I wanted to do, but went along. It sounded like it would be a fun thing to like join my husband on a work trip. And I sat by the pool, so many people, and I kind of made a little experiment like what you're describing, people watching with this idea of, okay, my gut feeling is there are hundreds of people here. It's a beautiful day. The conditions could not be better. And some of these people have probably saved up for a year or more for this ideal moment. This is I'm going to relax in Vegas and my life will feel so good and wonderful. And I feel creepy now, but I was watching people, and I swear to God, Ash, I could not find a person who looked relaxed in a way that they were sustaining or enjoying at all. Fidgeting, fidgeting, adjusting, which like I always think that there's something like sunbathing has good PR, but it's really not that fun. I don't find it's not super pleasant. And I never read as much as I planned. I bring the book and you bring this and you bring that and you get a drink and it's constant fidgeting. And I was just fascinated by this kind of sea of people who had been living for this moment, and I saw no visible evidence of relaxation happening. I wonder how this sounds like to listeners though, because they're like, no, when I'm on vacation, I really relax. But I don't know. I don't know. I just think if we really turn our curiosity towards our own subjective experience, sometimes those experiences don't live up to the ideal that we had in mind. And I think there can be a lot of torture involved in that distinction or that gap between.
Yeah, no, you're making me think completely about how so much of our life is really, when you get down to it, in service of trying to curate a type of emotional experience. When
Uh-huh.
you ask like, why do you want to do that type of a job? Or why do you want to make that kind of money? Or why do you want to be with that type of person? If you keep asking the question, why, at the end, you often get to a place where people say, because it will make me feel something. It'll make me feel happy.
Hmm.
It'll make me feel connected, fulfilled, of purpose, whatever it might be. If we're making choices like booking these holidays or, booking into this yoga class, there is part of our mind which is like, we are doing this to try to get this outcome of relaxation, mindfulness for
Hmm.
your yoga class. Like,
Hmm.
I want to be aroused and entertained in my date. We kind of want these. We kind of want to get these things as part and parcel of the experience.
Yeah, it is curation, and it's also marketing. And I just listened to Rick Steves reflecting on his lifetime of career, encouraging people to travel, and how now people seem to be there for the Instagrammable features, like to show their friends back home the fun they're having, which is
Mhm.
kind of related to this idea of, we live for these moments, but then do we actually inhabit them, which I'm just endlessly fascinated
Mm.
by that because when it does, especially when it doesn't live up to what we were thinking it would be. But I like this idea. One of the things that I heard in your report too was this idea of untangling, and I want to put this on the table that when we're talking about detecting emotion, it doesn't mean that it will suddenly be very precise and high resolution. And it's sort of like one of the hardest emotions, I think, or feelings to detect in the body is when it's all over. Like when it's all over and you're kind of like, I can't feel it in my body because you're sort of in, like let's say you're in the agitation, you've been cold for as long as it's taken before the timer's gone off, and then you're sort of maybe not aware of agitation in the face or stomach because you're sort of kind of all agitation. So
Mhm.
I think there can be that, and there can also be such a blurry line between the physical discomfort and the emotional discomfort, what I really try to encourage people to do is to even guess or play around or experiment, trying to untangle. I love the word untangle for this. Okay, this is physically uncomfortable, but I'm also aware of this emotional discomfort. And the combined, they kind of maybe amplify each other. Or when your description, I heard physical pain not amplified by
Mm.
emotion because you
Yeah.
had a kind of a end point, you were kind of into it, you were doing it willingly. There's also the let's be honest, when we're in control of the variables, the
Yeah.
experiment can be a lot more fun,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Less
I, I think nausea is one for me when you were saying that automatically
uh,
comes to mind. It's something that is often something that's with an emotional experience for me, and it does get expounded
yeah.
by the emotional component and makes it worse.
Yeah, and the heat, like in a sauna, I feel there's some kind of breathing, like oxygen deprivation feeling. It feels like, are we sure there's enough air in here for me to be okay? Is this really safe? Because my skin is starting to like it's sort of misfiring. My brain doesn't know how to. Why are you doing? Why are you willingly sitting here in this discomfort? Um, there's something else about I don't there's something about pain and the subjectivity of it and what makes it such a challenge. You mentioned research, and I don't think I ever told you. One time I was in Vermont for a study. They were looking for people with meditation experience as part of a pain study. And have you ever done anything like this? Or maybe you've read about this. They had this little device about the size of a postage stamp. It was a little metal cube looking thing, and
Mhm.
they put it on my leg and
Mhm.
they were trying to determine my personal comfort around pain. So it was generating heat or the
Mhm.
perception of heat without the risk of causing any kind of a lasting permanent damage. It wasn't actual heat. I don't exactly know how it works,
I
but
think it's
they
like
were
an
trying to
electric current. I've had it done on my arm before.
have you?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you find out what's your 7, what's your 10, so that they can then compare findings based, because then I was under a fMRI machine and they were exposing me to stimulus and then having me respond and relax and do things. But I thought it was most interesting that they have to sort of find my 7 on a
Mhm.
scale from 1 to 10 of
Yeah.
pain, which in that just implies that we're all so different and that one person's tolerance for physical pain is going to be very different than someone else's. And then when talking about emotional pain, I mean, I don't think they've invented a device yet that could get at that to quantify what's it like to have emotional pain. But I guess maybe the emotional pain is probably tangled up in that reaction anyway.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, I've thought about that a lot actually. It's something, when I talk to other women about childbirth and the experiences that women have, with the enduring like the physical pain, with it being linked to, like a positive outcome of having a baby. And most of the time, these women all want to be having their babies. And then going, well, was your contractions the same as my contractions?
uh-huh.
What other elements are playing out in that experience? Is obviously a whole emotional component as well. And so it's hard to compare, just like it's hard to compare what your sadness feels like in relation to my sadness or what your anxiety feels like in relation to mine, even though they do have a lot of elements that will cross over.
I've talked to a woman who was a nurse in that setting, and she would say there would be these rare women who had done some kind of preparation, some kind of concentration, relaxation, skill development. And she
Mhm.
said everybody would kind of gather around to watch them do it
Mhm.
because it was such a unique way to go about it. It was kind of mind blowing. Like it's like again, we think this person is superhuman, but maybe she just really well, it could be a combination of her personality and her interests, but also some investment of skill development into that, super high level challenge. But so one thing I'd like to talk to you today, this is something that I find I'm constantly trying to explain in the world, and I don't know that I'm very good at it. And I always want to try to get better at this message. And I wanted to get your take and push back and challenge me on it a bit. And it's this idea of acceptance that is so easy to talk about and so easy to post about and put quotes about and just accept. It is what it is. Just let it go. What are all these things, which I personally have never in my life found comfort in or use from anyone telling me to let something go or just accept it.
Mm-hmm.
And what sort of has blown my mind I've been at this for 20 years, and I always try to remember, when did this really start to turn? Because didn't take 10 years. It was more like in the 3 or 4 or 5 year range, where instead of interpreting the message of accepting a situation, which is, I think, what we mostly hear, my husband left me. I got a diagnosis of something, or I'm I think I have to be the one to initiate a divorce in my relationship, or coming to terms with my sexuality. The situation is the emphasis. I'm a character in a narrative, and I want some kind of end to the conflict. So in mindfulness, I think there's this little trap door or escape hatch where it's not about accepting the situation anymore. It's about trying to accept the sensations that comprise that moment, more like zooming into the moment by moment experience and sort of untangling the various elements. So instead of saying, I'm trying to think of a good example to share, and maybe one will come to you, but instead of saying, well, this one that comes to my mind. And so probably 10 years ago, we had a dog that was old and getting older and getting all these medical problems. And we finally reached a point where there was nothing else to be done. It was a sad, terrible situation. They wanted to start taking her eyes, and she was already incontinent. It was not good. Her quality of life was obviously dropped. But on the day we were supposed to take her in, I walked her, and there was no evidence of any discomfort or problem at all. It was like she was having the best day. And I'm like, no, you need to please act like you're suffering, because this is going to be a hard day for us. And I remember getting to the vet, and Matt opened the door. Matt got out of the car and was opening the door. And I scooped Samantha up into my arms, and I can't walk. My body won't move. I can't take a step towards this. I don't want to go into this situation. And the whole thing plays out, and I thought it was as humane as it could be, but it was also still kind of disturbing. And this is what I end up doing with my formal meditation practice: is those emotions are going to need to be felt probably over the course of days or weeks. And one of the things I found really interesting in the aftermath of that was that the story sounds like a sad story. I'm having a dog euthanized, a dog that was part of our family euthanized. That's a sad story. But when I would investigate the feelings in my body, like you and I talked about last week, what do I actually feel? And I feel teary in my face, but I can't really find any sensation that's broadcasting sadness. But I am aware of a strong sensation of fear, if this makes any sense. One of the things I love about this is then I'm living as if I'm trying to accept a sad story. But then my body, when I really strip away all the narrative elements and just examine the sensory components, I'm like, oh, this is a story about fear. And I can maybe think about that and unpack it. But all I know is that it was easier to accept the sensations one at a time than it was to try to accept the situation. So I don't know if that rings any bells, but I find this really a difficult angle to convey to people, that sometimes there's not a solution to the situation, and that we can take some strange and actually really deep comfort in yielding to the sensations as they unfold, without jumping to interpretation or escalation, or like trying to push it away, or even acting like there's nothing wrong. But I don't know, what's your reaction to that?
I was thinking about it because obviously in what I've shared already this year, about letting go being a major theme of my 2024, and things happening in my life that I didn't ask for this year, and that I felt like I didn't get a lot of an active choice in, and yeah, a lot of directives in radical acceptance.
Mm,
And I tell you what has really pissed me off is some people who decide to serve the platitudes, like people will do what they're going to do, or it is what it is, and we just go with it. And it's like, it makes me furious.
Me
And
too.
I was trying to work out why, again, with your challenge, like those things when spoken out. And unfortunately, I have too many friends who said shit like this. And I think that sometimes it's about people who don't really know what to say or how to say
Yeah.
it. But I do think that there is a lot of encouragement for this feeling of acceptance. And I wonder as well how much of that has to do with other people feeling uncomfortable
Hmm.
whilst you're in the middle of the mess. Because
Yeah.
unless you're a therapist or you're someone who's trained, or maybe not super neurotic around other people having their big feelings,
Yeah.
then people prefer that you're just okay, that you're good,
Uh-huh.
that you're
Uh-huh.
better. So you you accepting where you're at and what's going on is better for them too. They don't have to
Right,
deal
right.
with the sloppy.
I think that you're right. People are uncomfortable with your discomfort, and they want to say something encouraging, I guess. I also have a theory, this is unprovable, but when I hear somebody say something like just let it go, or some kind of, even some of the stoic thoughts, I think, oh, in my mind, I make a note. This person doesn't feel their feelings in their body the way I feel mine.
Yeah, that's how I feel
And
too.
and so you're giving me advice that would work for you, but it wouldn't work for me.
Yeah,
It's
this is
funny that I mentioned the marathon training too. I'm not the runner who's encouraged by cheerleaders saying, "You got this, you look strong, you're almost there." Don't tell me any of these lies. These are all lies. I want you to say, "You look like shit, but keep going. I believe in you." Or like you've trained hard, or you're halfway there, or you're about to tap into a reserve you don't realize is available to you, or something like this. But don't tell me that I'm almost there and I look good and whatever. It's like I feel like there's a
yeah, babe,
lazy
you
way
got it. You got this.
to. That's never helped me. Same thing with my TEDx talk. People would say, you've got this, just enjoy it. I'm like, no, 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 I don't. There is no way, there is no assumption that I've got this. And I felt it palpably in my body for 5 hours before I gave my talk, that there is no guarantee how this will go. In fact, I had done a couple like test drives of that did not go well at all, so it wasn't useful information. But there is that helps me to consider that there are people out in the world who feel their feelings differently than I, or experience their feelings differently.
Mhm.
And I find that a lot of us, I don't know, who have big feelings find ourselves in relationships with people who have their emotions come to them differently than we
Mhm.
do. Oh my God, I could tell you a lot. I could tell you many stories about how it's probably took how many years to sort of, it's like being in a bilingual household and realizing, oh, he's never going to learn Spanish. I'm going to have to learn whatever language. I have to learn that sometimes a budget or a spreadsheet means I love you. Or, like I would never convey romantic feelings in the form of some kind of formula or
Excel, yeah.
Excel. But if I'm going to be in this relationship, I'm going to have to learn to hear I think he hears, or something in his emotional experience is more what I would consider to be mental
Mm.
and not bodily, like being able, we've had arguments where I take a walk and I'm like, I can feel all these emotions in my face, in my cheeks, in my jaw. I can feel emotions coming out of my chest and whatever. And whenever I've tried to explain that to him, he's like, I think he thinks I'm just making it up. Like, and I think he's making it up
Dramatic. That sort of
but I
energy,
think
right?
he's making it up that he like, don't you feel isn't there a scene in Silver Linings Playbook where, oh gosh, who's the guy? It's like Jennifer Lawrence and who?
Bradley Cooper.
Bradley Cooper, and they're dancing or something, and then she catches him having an emotional reaction. She's like, that's an emotion. What you're feeling
Mm.
right now, that's an emotion. He's like, it is.
Mm.
And I think those of us who feel are feeling strongly, I think there's an inevitability that we're going to have to find a way to bridge this divide and to be able to hear how other people experience their emotions or get better at conveying that, to be heard. And that's a whole, maybe that's a whole other conversation for us to have one of these days. But it is interesting to know that my responsibility is to get as familiar as I can with my own emotional reactions, to feel my feelings, and then if the relationship requires that level of intimacy, I'm gonna have to get fluent in conveying that somehow in a way that makes sense to someone who doesn't feel their feelings in their body. It's a big
Yeah.
challenge. And no one talks about this, do they?
No, I don't think so. I feel like I'm almost at the forefront of having to be tasked with this because what I'm like almost on my sixth date with this character that I spoke about last time. And so far, we haven't gone into this emotional, philosophical, existential realm. And
Good.
I have to say that, there's part of me that kind of holds back going there, even though it's a
Yeah.
huge part of who I am.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes, sometimes it's a lot. And
Yeah.
not a lot of people are just like so down for these types of conversations on like from the get-go. I think as well
You
because
know,
they also promote a lot of vulnerability straight off the bat. And I recognize the need to sometimes slowly ease yourself in. It can be a bit of an onslaught. So I've just been curious about like, I wonder how I start this
hmm
conversation. Not only do I want to get to know him and his relationship with his feelings, but also I need him to understand what type of person I am because I don't want him to be blindsided in that he's made up a different version of me in his own mind because I haven't been authentic or transparent.
Well, I have definitely had points in my life where I had let people know before we proceed with this date, there is a warning label. You need to know, you need to be aware of a few things. Because I can wake up first thing in the morning and I can just jump in to let's unpack all our feelings. So that
Oh,
no, I think
me
you're
too.
right. I can relate to everything you're saying. And I think there is a wisdom in pacing ourselves.
Mm.
Also, if I could do some things over in life, that would be like establishing some kind of a foundation and trust before just giving people my, most, they don't feel secret to me. I'm excited by my emotions. I like talking about
Mm.
feelings.
Me too.
And I also don't think I think of feelings in the same way that other people do as far as like making an identity out of them, especially now
Mm.
more than ever I don't. So the fact that I could have a wave of terror doesn't seem problematic
Mm.
to me, or yeah. But I think it can be a lot to convey something uh, to someone, especially when it's in the category of I have an unmet need, or I have
Mm.
something I want, or I have a question I need to ask, or probably one of the biggest challenges of my relationship life has been when I can't read another person's subjective experience at all. And the problem is I kind of find it attractive simultaneous. It's like an ink blot, I'm afraid. Like I'm reading into what I can't really interpret, but I can really be a lot. If I leave that unchecked, I can just ask you, "Are you mad at me, Ash? Are you mad at me? Are you mad? Why are you so quiet? Is there something going on? Are you upset about something? Is work stressful? Are you mad at me? Did I say something? And that's not fun to be around, I've heard. But and actually, that's really fitting with the theme of what our conversations, I think, are about to me, the curses and blessings of big feelings. My current marriage needs my big feelings. Someone's going to have to bring it. That's my kind of my responsibility to keep that going. But I have to temper that as well.
There needs to be, this is my beef, okay? This is my beef, is that I would love to be able to just bring to the table meeting somebody new or making a new friend and saying to them, I have big feelings or I am fairly neurotic. And I found that this is a lot easier to do amongst therapists. So people who already have the language of emotion
Mhm.
and understand, that they deal with a lot of people with big feelings anyway. But I think obviously it's like quite a broad spectrum of people who have big feelings. And I think that as soon as you confess that or you admit to it, there's instantly going to be a response. And particularly more so, I think, amongst the people who would not define themselves in that way as a person with
Mhm.
big feelings. And I think that instantly what they're going to think about you is, okay, this person's going to be over the top. They're going to be sensitive to everything. They're going to be, difficult to be around, difficult to get along with, unpredictable, unmanageable, and all these
Hmm.
things, all of these adjectives that I like do not want associated with
Right.
me. And
Right.
and a lot of them I feel don't fit me either. So it's kind of like,
Huh.
how do you explain? I do feel in big ways, and I have needs associated with managing those feelings, but I don't want you to rush into your stereotypical associations of what a neurotic person or a person with big feelings is like.
I totally relate. And I think that part of what's missing is sort of like a cultural reference point. Who can you point to that you can say, oh, this person is sensitive and artistic and curious and engaged and has big feelings and is stable and doesn't take things personally and you can count on this person to not overreact. It's not a component from drama. You're not going to see this in a reality show. You're going to see this opposite. When we think about big feelings and emotional sensitivity, we think drama, we think
Mhm.
over the top, we
Chaos.
think
Yes.
we being involved in like court for years with someone who's getting a revenge in the courtroom or something,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
It's terrifying for people. But I'm with you. How do we get better at it's this selling the positive sides? I have big feelings. That's a good thing. I think what I am committed to is taking responsibility for my relationship with my feelings. And I think that can be a relief to the person. It's not saying I'm unhinged or emotionally labile. I think a lot of what passes for emotionality is what we see as people who are just, up and down and unpredictable, and that's what scares people. And
Yes.
that's different than big feelings. That's like maybe that's a little bit more of that instability that we could frame it as. But, if I'm taking some responsibility for my feelings, I think that saves a lot. In fact, even to the point where I can just acknowledge you're being really quiet and my like spidey sense is going wild, but I'm just going to take this as a little bit of homework for me. You let me know if there's something I need to worry about, but I'm just going to like try to not jump to interpreting that this means something. Those messages of taking responsibility for our own feelings, I think, go a long way in helping people learn to live with us as we live with our big feelings. I think so. It's served me well. Communication is always the key. Honesty is always the key, but also taking some responsibility that I'm not expecting you to solve my feelings. I'm trying to get better at feeling them and communicating them. So are you willing to is that something that scares you or are you cool with that,
I love that. I am almost thinking that we have to rebrand as like the elegant neurotic. As
Uh,
it's kind of a way of approaching one's neuroticism, which is not necessarily trying to become less neurotic or trying to feel less. It's more about understanding how, like owning your shit, like owning your emotional shit first and foremost, and then
uh-huh.
understanding how to navigate that. What things come into the pool of your control, where you're like, actually, I'm having like a major freak out right now, and this is how I'm going to deal with it. And this is also how I'm going to enlist other social support and communication and outreach and my environment to help deal with it. And
Uh-huh.
it requires so much experimentation, self learning, self awareness. And I like this idea that we can be neurotic and still elegant, still
Yeah.
poised in our approach with how we manage our feelings, even when they are so huge, we feel like we're going to get swallowed whole.
And I would even add, we can be attractive and valuable and valued and appreciated. It really does to me seem like a communication challenge in many ways because the person we're trying to convey all these things to needs to, it's like, I have to teach you. To be honest, I think sometimes the therapy language gets in the way. And sometimes I think we have to find ways to simultaneously relate to our feelings better, but also to convey those in really natural, plain language that
Mhm.
it's sometimes it feels like I'm improvising. Do I have to make this? Do I have to make this up? I guess I do have to make this up because there's no self-help book that I've ever found for navigating this perfectly. It's more like I got to just give this a shot to try to communicate it better without sounding like I'm a therapist or even,
Mhm.
God forbid, a meditation teacher.
I think that brings us to the end of our episode today. It was really interesting, and I hope that we can keep talking about it. Maybe in our next episode, we can dive into more of these complications with communication, understanding our emotional experience first and foremost, and then what do we do with it when other people might be involved or might be able to help.
I love it. Yep. Some of my favorite topics. So yeah, let's do it.